Right, good afternoon. I hope you all had a great lunch. I'm Max Sugarman. I'm Chief Executive of ITS UK. And for those who don't know us, we're the Industry Association for Transport Technology. We have about 180 members, many of them in this room, who work on a range of different technologies to support the transport network. And enforcement and road safety is obviously critical, so it's fantastic to be chairing this afternoon's session. We do a huge amount on road safety. We have an enforcement forum, which Geoff and Jamie are involved in. And we work quite a lot in terms of looking at how we can get more technology onto the network, looking at things like the Home Office type approval process and other ways that we can support road safety. And one of the things that I just want to mention before we invite our panelists up and our speakers up to talk is something that's been mentioned a few times, which is funding, and is clearly a critical issue at the moment. I think it's fair to say the spending review is both an opportunity and also a bit of a challenge for the sector, in that we're going to need to justify all the things that we do in terms of why it needs further government investment. And one of the things I would like to highlight is that ITS UK is working on a study to evaluate the size of the ITS sector in the UK. We're going to be looking at the jobs, the GVA and the tax revenue it produces, including in the safety arena and in the work that you guys all do. We're going to need the sector's help for that. So in the coming months, we're going to be producing a survey that we're going to be asking people to respond to. If you'd like to find out more about that study, do come and talk to me, and we can share a link to the survey that we're producing. But it is really critical, I think, that we come with hard figures as to why what we do is important, and make the case for those in the Treasury and in DFT that what we do has economic benefit, as well as obviously the benefits that better road safety provides. Now, we've got 3 speakers coming up in the next session, which is on looking at safe road users. It's worth saying, I've had a few questions about this, but all slides are going to be available after the presentations, after today's session. So they will be online, and there'll be a recording available too. I'm going to be quite mean with timing, just so that we can all get out at the right time. So if to our speakers, if I put my hand up, that is 5 minutes. And if you can wrap up within those 5 minutes, that would be really appreciated. It just means we all get a fair crack at the whip. Without further ado, we're going to have Katy Simpson from Aviva, Geoff Collins from Acusensus, and Brett Gascoine joining us online from Samsara. As I said, looking at how we can improve safety for road users. So Katy Simpson from Aviva, if I can ask you up to speak first. Oh, and one housekeeping issue. I think we're now using this lovely Aviva microphone. I don't think this is working.
Okay, I'm going to be operating 3 things whilst I'm doing this, so if there's any glitches, then obviously give me a moment. Okay, Okay, so just to introduce myself first of all, my name's Katy. I've been working in telematics in car insurance for about the last 10 years, and I can safely say that over that period I've learned in equal measures what to do and what not to do with telematics in car insurance. So it's been quite a long learning curve during that period. But I just wanted to give you a bit of an introduction as to what the telematics market is looking like at the moment. So in the UK, the market is very well established. Our first product was launched back in 2006, so we've got nearly 20 years of experience in telematics. We're now seeing around 600,000 policies being purchased on an annual basis, and billions of miles worth of recorded data every single year. The products are a variety of different technologies, including the car, from black box, which is fully fitted into the vehicle, to app-only devices, which are just operated from the consumer's mobile phone. It's still very much focused on young drivers and inexperienced drivers. We're yet to really see an adoption from the wider market, so that the majority of that 600,000, at least 70% of them tend to be drivers under the age of 29. So, so basically, fixing that and trying to get it into more older drivers' vehicles is something that's really key over the next few years. So I also wanted to give you a bit of a flavour of what we wanted to do. So we launched our new telematics product, Quote Me Happy Connect, back in 2022. Now, what we wanted to do was we wanted to understand whether or not we could create a generation of safer drivers. So it was very much looking at focusing on how you could influence driving behaviour rather than kind of coming in with really restrictive curfews and harsh cancellation policies and really kind of trying to impose our will upon those customers. It was more about how can we coach customers to change their driving behaviour and then reward them for doing that. So making it a much more positive experience rather than the usual assumed, big brother, harsh, you drive once over 30 miles an hour and we'll cancel your policy in 5 minutes. So what we decided to do was we pinpoint exact areas of where customers need coaching. We tell them what to do. So rather than just kind of keeping all that data to ourselves and our understanding, actually, we say to customers, we'll send them specific videos on what they need to do, and then we offer them rewards on a weekly basis, and then continue to educate them throughout the life cycle of their policy. So it's very much about hand-holding them through those first couple of months of driving to make sure that they're reducing those claims in that early period. So this is just a bit of an example of how that works. So we use multiple different modes of communication with our customers. So we've got in-app messaging. We also use text messaging and email for our green and gold customers. So we've created a very simple kind of RAG status, so cohorts of customers have a really good understanding of how they're driving and how they're being measured. So on a weekly basis, we'll communicate with them that they are doing the right things, that they're in that gold cohort or they're in green, and then we reward them on a weekly basis. For the drivers that aren't doing so well, so we tend to see the red or amber drivers, we will, as I said, send them specific videos, tell them what they need to do. And then for the worst drivers, so the ones that are driving extreme, very, very dangerously, we do kind of suggest to them that we're going to cancel their policies. But it's only really for those really extreme drivers where they're driving, in excess of 90 to 100 miles an hour, where we see, on a regular basis, for a 17, 18-year-old doing that kind of thing, it can be very dangerous. So for the real kind of strong cohort, we do try and look to have a bit more of a stronger message. But for everyone else, it's very much about encouraging them on that journey. So what has the result been of that? So we've really seen an improvement in that driving. So we can see that our average scores improve by about 20% in the first month. So they tend to start off driving a little bit more, I suppose, not recklessly, but a little bit more relaxed. And then we give them a bit of coaching. We tend to move them up through that journey. 86% of our customers are getting financial rewards. So we're not trying to hold back on that reward. We really want to incentivize them. And for the ones that are driving best, that we're sharing in the benefits that we're seeing. Plenty of discounts at renewal, so we go on to give them discounts, so around 20 to 30% off their premium. And what we're actually seeing is customers that move out of the red zone into the green and gold zone, we're actually seeing bodily injury claims reduced by 80%. So we're seeing a massive change in their driving behaviour, which is leading to less bodily injury claims. What we can also see is that the people that are having bodily injury claims, the severity, so the cost of those claims, are about 13% lower for the same profile of customers that are not on telematics. So what you tend to see then is that the accidents that do take place, they're of a lower severity. So the fact that they are driving slightly safer is meaning that the impacts aren't as harsh as what you find when there isn't telematics. So not only do they slightly go down, then they also are of a lesser impact. And we can see here, so earlier on this year, we changed some of our messaging to our customers to try and get them to reduce those red trips even further. And just by changing that message, we actually saw the percentage of red trips go down after that messaging came out. So it's really interesting to see that you kind of send that message out and actually straight away customers are on board with it and looking to change their behaviour. We've got a few other plans. So one of the other areas that we're looking at the moment is early claims interventions. Around, I think the number is startling, it's something like 90% of the claims costs, because the claims tend to be a bit higher in that area, happen within the first 3 months of the policy. So it's a huge percentage that happen really early on. And what we're trying to do is really intervene in those first 3 months to try and reduce the number of accidents that happen there. So we've got some more campaigns. So we're looking to continuously build on this to try and improve that overall experience. Now, moving on to the wider market, so the older age group. So what we know about the rest of the market is that 80% of them are saying that price is really important to them. They want cheap insurance. 59% of them will have said when surveyed that they would consider telematics as a product they'd consider to have in order to reduce their price. But only about 8% of customers go on to do that. We know from our experience that our prices need to be about 20% lower than the next, the non-standard, so the non-telematics product. So if a customer is going to choose telematics, it has to be significantly cheaper. We also know about 80% of customers believe that they're really good drivers. So we know that they don't want to be told. They don't want to be coached into their driving. They don't want that big brother in the back of their car. So what we're actually now seeing, which seems to be getting a bit of traction, is the post-sale app. So most of the major insurers have now got an app that customers are able to download after they've bought the policy. But it doesn't focus on coaching them. The tracking is just an element of the app. What it actually does is it brings in policy administration, uploading your no claims bonus. It'll bring in crash detection, so you're there at the point of an accident to advise somebody on what they should do on the side of the road. And what we're actually starting to see is TNPS scores going up for customers that have that app. We're also seeing renewal retention rates higher. We know from our app we get about 7-8% improvement on our renewal retention rate, which is not to be sniffed at for a company the size of Aviva. And we're also starting to see the loss ratios going down. So I think what we're starting to see is there is a preconception about telematics, but if you can take that preconception away and enhance the customer experience and bring that in post-sale, actually customers are willing to use it and adopt it, and if it is bringing something extra into their life. Admiral are advertising they've had 1.4 million downloads of their app. So customers will do it if they think that they're not going to be tracked or it's not going to be the big brother element. So I think in conclusion, I think what we can see is that for young drivers, it is actually working. We're seeing a big adoption for young drivers, and we're starting to see that needle move, and claims are coming down, roads are becoming safer, and accidents are of a lower severity if you have a telematics product and you are using it effectively and sharing your knowledge with your customers. I think for the more mass market, it does need to be something that's different. If we go out with the same products, trying to push the same message about needing to improve their driving, etc., then we're not going to get the adoption that we need to really move the dial for the entire market. I think if we can continue to focus on customer experience, lots of the things that are safe driving are the same as kind of, eco driving. If you push that kind of thing, or fuel saving, so you actually have something that's in the customer's mind, actually you'll achieve the same results, which is safer roads and less accidents, but you're also giving customers what they need. So I think it's about making sure that, the insurance industry is about creating products that are right for the market, that will be adopted, because if customers don't start using it, then we won't get the needle change that we need. But it's great to see that we are seeing some movement for younger drivers, but the future is showing green shoots, I'd say, but there's still a bit of a way to go yet for older drivers. But yeah, that was it from me.
Thank you very much, Katy. That's great, and really good to see also that kind of customers being rewarded for their behaviour and how that has a big impact. So thank you very much. If we can ask you to take a seat, and we'll call you up for the panel later on. If I can invite Geoff Collins from Acusensus to come up and talk now. Geoff's going to talk a bit about seatbelt and distracted driver issues on the road and how we solve them. So Geoff, over to you. Oh, and you're going to need that.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. I hadn't appreciated how buried I was in the middle of the room then, so thanks for covering a bit of time for me there, Max. Can you hear me okay on this microphone? Brilliant. Okay, so I'm looking at the technology aspect for safer drivers, and in particular, the two things I'm looking at are the mobile phone and the seatbelt wearing. That's something that I've been concentrating on for about 2.5 years now. I've been working in the monitoring image enforcement space for longer than I care to remember, but I'm now the UK General Manager for Acusensus UK, And I'm also involved in the ITS UK Enforcement Forum, along with Jamie from PACTS. So we sort of live in the same kind of ecosystem. So it's good to have the chance to talk to you all today. I was quite pleased when I found we're doing a presentation in Hoxton, because Hoxton, we have a problem. And you probably are all aware, this is a growing problem. It's something that actually I think we perceive is getting bigger all of the time. And the mobile phone legislation changed initially to address handheld mobile phone use back in 2003, which is more than 20 years ago. And fundamentally, that's what it's about. It's about, are you using your phone? Are you holding your phone to your ear when you're driving? And that's not really the problem that we're actually facing today. Because in the last 20 years, the phone has changed fundamentally from that little handheld unit, the Nokia Blockia, which many of you will have had, through to a smart device which rarely ever rings, but will vibrate and will demand your attention immediately. Nomophobia is very real. I think a number of you in this room may suffer from it as well. If you are not checking your phone every few minutes or even every few seconds, you feel you're not engaged, you're not involved in things. And that's a problem when you're potentially going to be spending 2 hours in a killing machine driving from one place to another. And I think the majority of sane, rational drivers, and we heard that 80% of drivers are better than average. Everyone thinks they are better and safer than the other people around them, but the vast majority of people do perceive there is a threat on the road. So the guy behind you who is driving 2 tons of metal and is not looking at the road, here's a threat to you, here's a threat to everyone around you. I say he advisedly as well, because the data does show that it's more likely than not to be a he, but not exclusively. So looking at the data, and it's always really helpful, it's vital to actually use data and to understand what you're dealing with. And we've got DFT data, which is published every 2 years. The technology that I'm working with is actually used by the DFT to capture the initial data, not using the AI, the artificial intelligence, but using the radar to trigger image capture from different camera angles, which will then provide good baseline data. And what we learn is that typically 0.3% of drivers are holding their mobile phone at any one time. Now, that doesn't mean only 0.3% of people on a journey will use their phone, because it tends to be a transitory thing. You pick up your phone, you maybe put it down. But there's disproportionately more professional drivers. So van drivers in particular are holding their mobile phone when they're driving. Younger males, it's more prevalent, and a higher proportion at night as well. Then if we look at seatbelts, which is a completely different issue, but the technology is equally good at picking up both of these behaviours, and 2.4% of drivers are not restrained when they're driving, and typically that's a behaviour which continues for the entire journey. It's not just at a certain point. Not many people unclick the seatbelt and then put it back on again. But taxi and private hire are the worst. HGV and vans are really not good. Once again, we've got those professional drivers that are resulting in the major issue. And again, male drivers, it's a very prevalent issue for male drivers rather than female. However, the population of road users during the day is quite heavily dominated by male drivers. So that gives you the underlying survey data, which the DFT has, which tells us typically what's going on various different road types. But there's other data the DFT has, and we all know about Stats 19 and the post-collision data. But that doesn't necessarily draw a truly accurate picture of what's actually happening and the causation factors behind collisions which happen on the road, because it's not always captured accurately, repeatably, and correctly. And so, can you interrogate it to get meaningful answers? And what actually is the truth? Are we confident we know what the truth is? Well, I've looked in detail at a little bit more of the DFT type data, because they publish a wider range of information now. And this is a rhetorical question to you, but is 24.6% the same as 7.8%? Obviously not, but if we look at this data here on car occupant fatalities, around about a quarter of all car occupant fatalities were not wearing their seatbelt, which is pretty shocking. And it's actually, the latest published figure, 2023, is higher than the 5-year average before that. So we didn't fix this in the 1980s. We have an issue, we have a problem, which is actually getting larger, despite the cars getting, in theory, safer. You'll also notice that the age groups, so if you're 17 to 29 and you're a male and it's night, all of these are increased risk factors. And if you were to add them all together, I would hate to see what the percentage of young male drivers at night who die in a car not wearing a seatbelt. I fear it would be a very large number. But if you compare that to the new DFT Fatal 4 fact sheet, that tells you that 7.8% of fatal collisions involved someone not wearing a seatbelt. And you immediately think, how's that a different figure? And it just goes to show that there are different versions of the truth. There are different ways of looking at the number, because the data on the left relates to car occupants. The data on the right relates to all fatalities. And that could include incidents where there isn't a car involved at all, and there was no vehicle that even had a seatbelt. So you can see how, depending on the window that you look through, it can colour the view that we have. So just very briefly, I'm talking about a technology which is not only could help, it's actively being used to address this problem internationally. And there are 5 key steps to making the system work. The first is getting some equipment at the side of the road, and it's very particular high-resolution cameras and a radar which will trigger image capture. And then every single vehicle that goes by, images are captured automatically, which will then be reviewed by the thing that makes people jump up and down. There's AI running in real time on roadside processors, which will immediately put a flag to a case where the AI thinks there is a chance that the driver is distracted by their mobile phone or the driver is not wearing a seatbelt. So that's done very rapidly roadside in real time. But the really important part is there's always human review, usually 2 or 3 layers of human review. So someone in the UK will evaluate the image and determine if that potential violation is happening. And only if that's been validated twice will it then be passed over to the police to potentially do something further with it. So I've got some example images here. These are taken from a test track, so it's fine that you can see who the driver is. There's a GPS data block, tells you exactly where and when. But the important thing to understand is that mobile phone distraction, in less than 2% of cases, is the phone actually held to the ear. And the 2003 legislation, that's what it was pretty much all about, was holding your phone to your ear. A much greater problem is the more than 98% of cases where the phone is held low down, out of sight. And that means that the person who's distracted is not looking through the windscreen and concentrating on job number 1. They're looking down into their lap area, which is substantially more dangerous than actually just taking a phone call. So I'll go through this quickly, but we've used it in 19 force areas in the UK. And if it's in bold, they've actively prosecuted. And by that, I mean they've dealt with both mobile phone and seatbelt violations, and they've done something about it. So people have been prosecuted, maybe offered a training course. That's what it typically looks like roadside. That's a stealthy camera. There's another example of it. It can be put onto fixed infrastructure as well, but the relocatable version, it just gives us more opportunity to be where we need to be when we want to be there. And so there's an example. That's a professional driver, as I'm sure you would recognize, driving a very heavy aggregates lorry. He's not wearing a seatbelt, and he's doing something more interesting than concentrating on his driving. I have obscured the face here, but it probably shows you enough to see that you actually can see very clearly who is in the vehicle and who is committing the violation. So it avoids the "it wasn't me, it was my aunt" approach. You get a fantastically clear image, which very rarely gets challenged. And you may have seen this one before. Once again, a professional driver. possibly holding down a number of jobs at the same time. But this is the type of thing that's happening on our network, and we do have the tools to do something about it. So just giving you a quick overview of the first part of the country to have really gone to town actively live with this was Devon and Cornwall. They've run a number of initial pilots and then trials, and they're now operating on a long-term program. So that's an example of one of the trailers operating in Cornwall, which is a beautiful county, and it's not raining on that particular day, which makes it look even greater. But they are live looking for distracted driving and seatbelt behaviours. And I've got some of the early data for you, because it should all be about proving you've done something and that you're changing behaviours. Rather than catch people, you should change behaviours. And then if you really do have to do something about it, then you will do it. So looking initially at mobile phone use, we had 1.5 million vehicle activations during 1 month. And there were 3 locations which were being monitored. You don't have to look at each dot, but hopefully you can see there's a trend line for each location, which is dropping down. And in all, we saw a 1/3 drop in the number of cases where someone was seen holding their mobile phone during that period. Exactly the same locations, exactly the same equipment for seatbelt monitoring. And we actually had a 50% reduction in the number of cases where people were not wearing their seatbelt. So these bits of equipment, when people know they're there, they change their behaviour. And that is what we're trying to do. And what we want to do is to spread it over to a wider area. And part of that is to do with the media coverage. And Richard mentioned earlier about the story and what version of the story gets out there. It's really important that people understand what you're trying to do, why you're trying to do it, and you can control the narrative, and they start making sensible, rational decisions themselves. I can hear myself saying sensible and rational. But it is really important. And what we found is that there is a wide acceptance of this type of technology, particularly around the mobile phone. And I think it's because people understand the risk rather than it being an abstract risk. If you see the car in front of you swerving a little bit, you perceive that car could hit you. If that car hit you, you could be injured. So it's a different mental approach that people use, but the acceptance and the understanding of that is particularly important. And it's one of the things I hope, which is on our side, to do this a little bit more. So why aren't we seeing more of this technology? You've probably heard a lot about it because there's a huge level of interest about it, but it's not widely used yet. It's being used in islands of expertise. There is really good support from the police level. I have worked with many police forces in my career, and it's often difficult to get new things done with enthusiasm. But what I can say is from 100% of the forces who've trialled it, they've been enthusiastic and they wanted to do more. But it's new and it's different, and we are geared up to doing that which we understand, and with budget cuts and people in police forces working very hard doing what they've been tasked to do already, doing the new and the different is challenging. And the low-hanging fruit is speed enforcement, which is one of the 5 formerly pillars, and it's very important, but it's certainly not the only one. And so I feel there is a disproportionate focus on speed alone when a number of these other behaviours do need to be targeted directly. Operational cost recovery as well, I'll touch on this one briefly, but right now there is not a diversion course which is directly appropriate for distracted driving because it is perceived to be such an important and dangerous activity, so it's 6 points, so that's immediately a high bar. I would like to see a distracted driving diversion course which allows that approach to be targeted directly with ring-fenced funding that allows it to be used more. And I think that will probably be one of the key breakthrough moments to this kind of approach. And there are still concerns around mobile phone legislation. It's not perfect. There are gaps in it. We haven't yet been successfully challenged in court, but you throw enough mud at something over a long enough time, who knows what's going to pop out at the other end. And the legislation is not perfect. It's pretty good, but it's not perfect. And I know this will be music to your ears, Jamie, as well, but seatbelt wearing, you will appreciate, is non-endorsable. So if you choose to pay the fine, you can just keep on paying a fine, another fine, another fine, another fine. Who am I hurting? I'm not hurting anybody apart from myself, which isn't true. But I think when people take it a little bit more seriously and it's an endorsable violation, we will see better seatbelt wearing. Because I mentioned before, we're actually seeing fewer people wearing their seatbelt. We're going the wrong way on something we thought we'd fixed a while ago. So just wrapping up now, I think of the fatal 5, some of you think of the fatal 4. It depends on your road safety belief system. But technology does provide an approach to all of these dangerous behaviours. So that's, with my organisation, what we're actively working on. Many people in the room as well are coming to do the same things. And that's how we make change. It's not just catching people, it's changing what people do, the people in the machine, and that is how you save lives. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Geoff, and we'll bring you up on stage shortly to answer some questions as well. Right, now I'm kind of moved to the Graham Norton on Eurovision point where we invite someone to come in online. So we're going to see if this works. Hi, Brett. Can you hear us okay?
I can indeed. Hopefully you can hear me okay, and apologies I couldn't be there in person today.
Yeah, you're coming in loud and clear, so if you want to give us your presentation, that'd be fantastic.
Fantastic. Let's make sure this virtual clicker works for us. Yeah, virtual clicker doesn't seem to be working, so if we could go to, I'm going to have to next slide you as we go through it, if that's okay.
Yeah, I can do that.
So thank you. Or actually has it clicked in? It's missed the first slide. We could go back one, sorry.
There you go. Does that come through?
Okay, perfect. So look, I'm with a company called Samsara, and we specialise in AI cameras, ideally to prevent accidents on the road. Our approach that we take is we're not there to be the viewpoint of just why an accident happened, but actually try to prevent it. Last year alone, we prevented an estimated 200,000 accidents across multiple vehicles. We provide a AI solution which is predominantly used across large commercial fleets. And the purpose of the presentation today is really to talk to you about how this AI can be moved across to consumers, and how we can start to see technology rolled out across the roads to really help to prevent road safety incidents. And it's interesting what Geoff was just talking about on the distracted driving side, and the distraction, being a key part of it. And the road safety charity Break says that there's 3 types of distracted driving. So there's manual, which is where hands are not on the steering wheel, so hands are being somewhere else, driver's not in control of the vehicle. And there's visual, which is where the driver's not watching the road, so they're looking elsewhere. They might be looking at a mobile phone, they might be looking at children in the back of the car perhaps. And there's cognitive, which is where the driver is not mentally focused on the road and other vehicles or obstacles. So really the way that the technology works is to start to prevent these behaviours. So telematics is great in understanding how a vehicle's being driven, but cameras with AI fitted into a vehicle starts to understand how the driver is behaving. So if we could go to the next slide, please. So when we look at rolling it out, and this will be an interesting one to think about for consumers, just a quick quiz for you. What percent of drivers would you say that in-cab technology is acceptable after they've used technology with the right change management? So if we could jump to the next slide, please. So change management, when we look at it across fleets and across industry, it's really about getting the message across that it's keeping the drivers safe. It's making sure that they get home. It's making sure that they're attentive, and that ultimately it's preventing them from being involved in any incidents. So again, if we can move on, please. So we actually find that with the right change management, we see that 70% of drivers are acceptable to the technology. And there's huge benefits that they can receive from this. So if we could jump to the next slide, please. So the main benefits for the drivers are protections from accidents or any frivolous complaints that may happen, ultimately providing exoneration for them. It helps to keep them safe. It can yield rewards to them for safer driver behaviour. And all of this is replicable down to consumers, if you think, such as reduced premiums on insurance, rewards that are put in place for them. And it can also help them uncover habits that they weren't aware of. We all, I would like to say that we all are guilty of habits that we've learned over the years. And when you're able to have a system in place that's able to give you an audible warning, to let you understand that you may be too close to a vehicle in front, that you may be distracted and not focusing on the road, this ultimately can help to be that prevention. For organisations, the reason that we see technology widely rolled out is because they see protection against not at fault claims and payouts. They're able to be much more proactive in their driver coaching, whether that's one-to-one coaching or whether that's indeed actually using technology in cab to provide in-cab coaching and alerts to them, and of course reduce insurance costs and incidents for them as well. Geoff mentioned about the technology being used as a deterrent, and we very much see that. We see when an in-cab camera, driver-facing camera is put into a vehicle, at the start of an engagement, we measure that baseline so that we can understand the driver behaviour before things like in-cab alerts and in-cab coaching are turned on. And there's always very much a placebo effect at first, where as soon as that camera is put in, driving behaviour changes significantly. Drivers are much safer. Drivers are able to focus, start to focus a lot more on the road, focus more on their habits. They're making sure that they're not too close to the vehicle in front. They're warned if there's a mobile phone usage, and they're able to stop that immediately. And the key thing that we're seeing for them is the exoneration side of it. So if we can go to the next slide, and hopefully we'll be able to play VT on this. If we try clicking on that again, hopefully this video will play for us. And no, it doesn't appear like the video is playing. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem to have come through on the PowerPoint. But I can tell you the story behind this. So effectively, you've got a couple of drivers here for a company called M Group. They were driving through the Dartford Tunnel, I believe it was. And the van that you can see in front of them in the picture, in the video that's not playing, it would actually show that the van suddenly careered across the road and it hit the refuge on the right-hand side. The rear bumper of the van then came backwards. The driver was very attentive. The driver was able to stop. The bumper collided with the front of the driver's vehicle. And when the police attended the scene, as called by the driver of the vehicle with the camera fitted, they immediately stated to them, how did you hit the vehicle? And felt that the driver in the camera vehicle was at fault because of the damage that they had to the front of their vehicle. Because they were able to immediately show the footage, which showed that, that it was actually the bumper coming across on the debris which hit their vehicle, this allowed them to immediately be exonerated from the incident. And this is a major factor that we look to put in when we talk about change management. Especially, I did see a question came up about unions. And with unions, we feel that it's very often there's a fear around privacy, around having the drivers being filmed. There is often a fear that somebody is sitting in a room watching hundreds of monitors at every incident that happens. But actually, the way technology should work and in our case does work, is it's not recording all the time. It's only firing down snippets of the incident when an incident happens, so when there's a safety event. And this is a huge part for exonerating drivers. We had another incident with one of our customers where unfortunately somebody stepped into the road and there was a fatality. Now, typically what would happen is there would have to be a lengthy investigation that takes place, but because of the footage that was captured showing that the driver was attentive, the driver did all they could to react, and there was nothing they could have done to prevent the incident. In situations like this, forget about the costs and everything that's involved. It was the ability to let that driver know immediately that they weren't at fault for the fatality, rather than it need to be dragged out and then have the mental anguish of wondering if there's anything that they could have done to prevent it. If we could jump on a couple of slides, please.
Bear with us, clicker doesn't seem to be working.
No problem.
I don't know whether the AV team
Yes.
Oh, there we go.
That's okay. We can move on to the next one. So what we're seeing here is just some examples of how AI is used. So what you're seeing is a box around the driver's head. And you can see here that technology is able to blur faces. So that helps to overcome that privacy side of things for organisations. But the box is able to detect where that driver is looking, and if that driver is indeed focused on the road, and is able to put an alert out to that driver, an audible alert, to warn them that they're distracted and to focus. And I've seen many, many incidents where the alert has come through, drivers have looked up, and it's actually stopped accidents from happening. We've also seen some shocking behaviour. I think one of the worst ones I saw was a driver that was undertaking an HGV on a motorway at 70 miles an hour, whilst sending messages on their mobile phone, reading the messages on their watch, and at the same time having an iPad sitting on their lap while they're watching a movie. And this is in a heavy goods vehicle. So the ability to prevent behaviour like this, and if indeed that behaviour is happening, to send that immediately to their fleet management, is what's ultimately helping prevent those accidents. Now, when we look at things such as inattentive driving, distracted driving, these are all lead indicators which will ultimately, if you look at think of the Heinrich triangle, where there could be a number of incidents or minor incidents that take place, these lead to major incidents, and these ultimately lead to fatalities. By being able to eradicate what could be seemingly to that driver just a simple little bit of inattentive driving, this ultimately helps to prevent these events from happening on the road. If we could click to the next slide as well, please. So we can see here around mobile phone usage. Again, it's detecting that the driver has got a mobile phone. We're able to detect the phone in the hand, and we're also able to detect where the driver is looking. The good thing about AI technology, when it's focusing on where the driver is looking, is even if that phone was below the dashboard and out of view of the camera, you would still be able to see that the driver's head and their eyes weren't focused on the road. We also see new technology coming in now, such as drowsiness detection, where you can detect drowsiness on multiple points, whether it be eye movement, yawning, the movement of the head. And again, alerts can be put out to tell drivers to rest. If we can move on, we've got another couple of examples here. So here we have a harsh driving event, where this is where telematics will detect a harsh event, such as harsh braking. You're able to, so if we look at this incident, so we've nearly had a driver go into the back of a cyclist here. Now, when you're using in-cab cameras and driver-facing cameras in conjunction with telematics, this is where you start to get a much clearer picture of what is happening. Because here you'd be able to see that, where the driver was looking, what was the driver focused on, so what has actually been the ultimate cause of this harsh event. And if we could now click onto the next one, which is an example of a crash event. So here we can see again, the driver is driving along, we can see a vehicle pulls across in front, and there's an incident that happens. Now, again, by marrying this up to the inward view of a camera, we can see where the driver was looking, how attentive the driver was there any, it's very clear to see in this incident from the forward footage that the driver in the Mercedes that pulled across was at fault. But is there ways in which this actually could have been prevented? And then finally, again, along the lines of what Geoff was talking about, we have seatbelt detection through AI, where what we're finding an increasing number of drivers are doing is there's telematics and in-cab telematics, things such as the Ford Pro system, are providing seatbelt detection through the buckle. And what we're seeing is drivers actually pulling the seatbelt across from the passenger seat and simply plugging that in to turn off the alert. Now, an in-cab camera which is facing that driver is able to detect if they are or are not wearing that seatbelt, and again send out an audible alert to them to fasten their seatbelt. And this can also be, if they don't put their seatbelt on, this can then be sent across to a control centre to advise them that drivers aren't wearing seatbelts. So we're starting to see a significant reduction in that. Ultimately, we see artificial intelligence being able to reduce incidents, so ultimately to provide increased safety on the roads. Also using artificial intelligence to understand routing can start to make things more efficient for drivers, and understanding switches to alternative fuels can start to make for a more sustainable future as well on our roads. So I look forward to the Q&A. Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you, Brett. And if you can stay with us, and we'll invite Geoff and Katy up to come and join us for a few questions. Right, so, are there any questions from the audience? If you need a bit of time to think, I've certainly got one, which is, so all three of you have discussed actually how we're getting more technology, whether in the cab or on the roadside, that is changing the way that drivers behave. You've spoken a bit about it throughout your presentations, but I just wanted to understand maybe in a bit more detail some of the challenges with how drivers are reacting to that, or whether you're getting them on board, and how you manage that in terms of some of these things that are quite new to drivers and initially might be, you might get a negative reaction, and bringing them with you on that. So I don't know whether anyone wants to start with that. Katy, if I go to you. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really difficult one. So there is a real hesitance in the UK market about using telematics, and we do tend to find that customers buy telematics accidentally a lot of the time, and then they'll just go on and cancel the policies. But what we found is actually, if you take the time to explain what they're doing, and if you have a proper customer strategy, which is about customer enhancement, actually you do get much more adoption. So the big thing that can really change the dial is crash detection. So having proactive ethanol, because obviously if you explain to customers that you're there at the point of an accident, they're more likely to keep it on all the time, because you obviously don't know when you're going to have an accident. So it's about really re-enhancing why they want to do it. So if you just talk about, you might get a bit of discount at renewal, or you might get this, or you might get that, then people don't want it and they'll walk away and they're not interested. But if you can really bring to life more of the benefits of it, then actually customers will get it. So I worked on a previous telematics proposition, which was a voluntary program. So you just bought a standard car insurance product, and then you chose to bring in the telematics. And we had about 65% adoption rate, because we took the time to explain what it was and advise them on how to do it, and the differences that it could make, and then they wanted. So you have to have a real customer strategy in place. It can't just be about, we want to check because we want to reduce accidents. Obviously, we want to reduce accidents, but everyone thinks that they're not going to have an accident. So you're almost selling them something that they don't think they need. But if you can make it real, then that's when you can get the adoption rates up.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
And Geoff, if I pass over to you next, what's the reaction been to Heads Up?
Well, initially, I just wanted to say from the 3 presentations, you actually got the complete range from the voluntary buy-in with a telematics system, and then with the fleet operator, if you want the job, you have to accept the telematics. And with the roadside criminal, potentially prosecution side, you have to obey the law. You have to do it right. So there are three stages there. But I think all of them, it ties into what you were saying. I think you need the buy-in from the people who are being monitored, because these things aren't done for fun and they aren't made to make anybody money. They're done to make it better for everyone. So I think it's beholden on everyone to get the communication right, and then we're doing what we're doing for the right reason.
Great. And Brett, I'm sorry, you're right behind me, but is there anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, no, I would say that I agree with both sides of it. Adoption is something that's key. What we often find when we're going through the change management side is there's a lot of disdain towards the use of technology, and a lot of fear around how it's going to interfere with their privacy. And very often it's you'll have a loud person in the room that's very against what you're looking to do. I don't want a camera in my vehicle. I don't want I don't want you watching me all the time. I don't want you seeing what I'm having for lunch or listening to me on a phone call. When none of this is actually going to happen. But it's when there's an exoneration for a driver or an incident is prevented that suddenly that whole dynamic changes. And if we look at a business like DHL that we work with, they've actually seen a 50% reduction in driver attrition because the drivers feel that actually there's more of a duty of care from their organisation, and they're actually trying to keep them safe. So the adoption curve of it is it's very slowly taken on, but once it is, it goes up steeply when they start to see the benefits that are involved. And to the point on the ethanol process and the crash detection, we're also seeing this process streamlined significantly, where drivers are able to use an app to fill in that insurance report at the time when the incident happens, to take photographs at the scene, and to provide that, to move away from the necessity to put a drawing together or mark on the vehicle where it was damaged, and able to cut that ethanol process down from what often was measured in days to being measured in minutes.
Fantastic, thank you. Questions? So we've got one online, and then we'll come to the lady over there.
Hi, I've just got a question for Brett, which is, have unions been involved in conversations? Really interested in their thoughts, as traditionally they have in some parts been a barrier to the use of technology previously.
Yeah, it's a really good point, and we do still see barriers from unions. The way that we look to manage this is to get involved very early on the change management side, and a big part of it is education. It's enabling unions to understand that this isn't about Big Brother watching. This is about safety. And look, in an ideal world, and hopefully we will see this change in time, but unions will be, rather than objecting to systems being centrally used, they'll be insisting that systems are used because of the safety it provides to their union members.
We had a question from the lady over here.
Thank you. Hello, Nicola Foster from Safer Essex Roads Partnership. A question for Katy. Thank you for your presentation. I think what you're doing is absolutely brilliant. However, 17 to 25-year-olds, as we all know, are still overrepresented. We're in Essex doing an awful lot of work in the education field with that age group, and they're still overrepresented. So with the Safe System, how can we work better together? Is there more information we can gather from your data that would help the likes of me, who is looking at engineering, education and enforcement, to understand more about what's going on in my county, where these things are happening, what behaviours are leading up to the actual collision, how can I better educate, where do I need to enforce? I mean, I know physically from Stats 19, what's the lead up to it? What could your data, do you think, tell us is an opportunity for us to work together and share information to actually bring the system together and really make inroads into preventing what is just such a waste of life? Breaks my heart.
Yeah, no, it makes for a very somber reading quite often. So, I mean, we have an absolute ton of data on telematics and what leads up to those accidents, and we're trying to expand that as much as possible. So really looking at, you know, as you were saying about mobile phone usage, we know that mobile phone usage is one of the biggest factors when it comes to, you know, road accidents. Also things like, you know, people who generally speed a little bit all the time tend to have a lot bigger accidents, all those little things. And we have plenty of data. As I said, we've had 20,000 claims so far on our telematics books, which is quite a lot of, you know, quite a lot of data to kind of process to understand what happens in the lead up. But I think, yeah, anything that we can do together to promote better driving and promote those kind of changing those behaviours. Yeah, I think we would be up for working on together on that and understand that, because we can interrogate that data. You know, if you're seeing something, if you're understanding, then we can look at, you know, we can look at the data and say, okay, well, what actually would be helpful, because it's all there to be analysed. And yeah, it's just kind of asking the right questions of it. But yeah, we do have a good understanding. So, and that's what we try and do. We try and do those coaching bits. We try to pinpoint exactly where they're going wrong, not just looking at the, you know, the really, really extreme events, but, you know, on a regular basis, as I said, you know, those consistent speeders, whilst they're not looking like really extreme drivers, they will go on to have an accident because they are taking slightly more of a risk than everyone else. Yeah, but...
Fantastic. Thank you. We've got time for one more question. So, Richard, do you want to go?
Thank you. Richard Kewarden from TRL, and thank you for the great presentations. Geoff, when you presented it, I was struck by you showed 2 DFT statistics and how they could be used just on seatbelt. And I think there's something true here as well. I bought a new car last year, and it's really interesting because my car tells me how a greener driver I am. It's electric. And I've got to be in the top 5% because of my nature. This car can take a selfie of me. It knows when I'm wearing the seatbelt by its legendary seatbelt reminder system, but also by its in-vision camera. It knows when I'm drowsy. We've got the insurance data, we've got the side of the road data, and we've got the aftermarket data. And we don't bring any of this together, right? And there's something around, if we want to understand how to prevent some of these things, especially driving for work or young drivers or older drivers like me, I think we've got a different potential problem ahead of us. One of the things I was slightly concerned about is that the problem we're trying to fix is based on the data that's 10 years old that was the problem then. And I think with all of this technology, we're going to have different problems, especially with the distraction in the vehicle, potentially. I just welcome your views on how we bring it all together.
We've got a minute or so, so very quickly, your views, maybe you want to pick up after this as well.
Well, just a very quick one from me. It's always challenging to bring data from different areas together. One of the biggest issues, to my mind, though, is that the majority of people kind of want to do the right thing, and it just needs a nudge for them to get to do the right thing. Particularly where you need criminal enforcement is where the people who have no intention of doing the right thing, they won't have a black box, they'll turn off anything that's monitoring them, and they'll try and void the system. So it's balancing that, the 90% that do it right, and the 10% that really do need to be walloped.
Brett, come to you next. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's and look, we see this across the commercial side, and in that you have an abundance of data that's coming in, and it's about how do you consolidate all that into one area to effectively give yourself that single view. I think I kind of touched on it in the presentation where you've got the information that's coming from the telemetry in the car, but you've also got the information that's coming from the camera, and how can you match that together, and how can you use that together? So it's about creating that single viewpoint, that single pane of glass, if you like, to understand all of these behaviours. How that will roll down to a consumer solution, unable to answer that question, but I think that's the point they would need to get to.
And Katy, last word to you.
Yeah, I mean, obviously with having all the data there, any way that we can use it for the better is great. But I suppose it's what we're going to be doing with the future. We need to get them more cars, more people using it. We've got a good understanding of what younger drivers do. We need that understanding of the wider market because they are different drivers in those ways. And it's just making sure that we have the right products out there, so we increase that adoption really.
It's worth saying, I think there's a DFT data and AI action plan coming down the line, as well as the road safety strategy. So I would suggest maybe some of these things need to come together and need to be thinking about these things across different strategies. On that note, thank you very much to my panel. That was really fantastic. Can we give them a round of applause, please?